All right, in this video, I'm talking about escrow refunds, which, when it comes to the term escrow in the real estate world, it can be kind of confusing because the word escrow actually means a few different things. And there's a few different scenarios where you would actually be getting an escrow refund. So let's dive into that. I'm a mortgage broker with over 20 years of experience helping people navigate the home buying process. And on this channel, I share tips and tricks that I've learned along the way to help you in your journey. Now, one more thing, we put together this awesome down payment assistance guide. It's free. Go ahead and click that link to download it. It's an awesome resource to help you along through the process. So, as far as escrow refunds go, like I said, there's some confusion around the word escrow. So first off, let's clear the air on escrow and why it's confusing. So when you're buying a house, you're going to be using something called an escrow company, or sometimes, depending on the state that you're in, it could be done by an attorney. But the majority of you're going to be using what is called an escrow company. And they're kind of like the middleman, the unbiased third party that handles all the money in the transaction. Basically, everybody sends them the money and then they send it to where it's supposed to be, okay? Now, there's also an escrow officer that works for the escrow company, and you're gonna make an escrow deposit. And your real estate agent, when you go into contract, they're gonna tell people that you are opening escrow, which is just slang for basically that you're in contract and that they are starting the process with that escrow company, okay? Now, to make things even more confusing, with a mortgage, when you include property taxes and homeowner's insurance in the monthly payment, most states refer to that as escrows, meaning, do you have an escrow account? When you log into your online account for your mortgage, a lot of times it'll show like escrow account, okay? In California, we call those impounds, okay? But not impounding your car. These are basically that your taxes and insurance are included in the payment. And so there's an account that holds that money when you make those monthly payments, that holds it until the lender pays it on your behalf. So you've got escrow officers, you've got escrow companies, you've got opening escrow, and then you've got this escrow account that you'll pay into. And in all of these different scenarios, you can potentially get a refund from escrow. So let's talk about that. All right, so the first scenario where you're gonna get an escrow refund is when you are buying a house, okay? Now, when you buy a house, you're gonna make a deposit. Even if you're doing 100% financing, the seller's still gonna want you to have some skin in the game, right? So you're gonna make an escrow deposit, and at the end of the transaction, what their job is to do is to balance the cash register, basically, if I was to take it way back in time. They're balancing the numbers down to zero, okay? And if you've put too much money into the pot, into the transaction, into escrow, then you will get an escrow refund about a week after the transaction closes. When a transaction closes, usually like a really good company that's on top of their game, they'll have that thing like balanced out that day or the day after. But sometimes it takes them a few days, and then you're of course waiting on snail mail. So expect your escrow refund check like within a week of your transaction closing. So an example would be like if you put in, an extra $534 that were not needed to close your transaction. Maybe your down payment wasn't as much, or the fees weren't as much, or whatever the case is, you get that $534 back, because ultimately that's your money. All right, so another scenario that comes up on every single refinance transaction, whether you're getting cash out, like for debt consolidation, home improvements, whatever, or if you're just doing a regular old rate term refinance where you're not getting any cash. See, here's the thing, on a refinance, it's impossible to get the numbers to zero, meaning that you're not getting any cash back or you're not having to pay any fees. Now you might be wondering well, why is that? Why can't they get the numbers right? Well, you pay interest for each day of the month that your transaction closes. That also impacts your taxes, it impacts your insurance, it impacts other little miscellaneous fees. And so depending on what day of the month all of this stuff happens, you're either gonna be like a little bit over or a little bit under. So even on a transaction where you get no money back, a non-cash out refinance, you're probably still gonna get a few bucks back, or you're gonna pay a few bucks in fees. What's a few bucks? I don't know, something less than like $100 is realistic of, probably what you will see on a regular basis. You might get a refund check for a whopping 21 bucks or whatever. But in these circumstances, you will get your escrow refund check, I would guess, within about a week from your transaction closing. Because again, just like the last scenario, your transaction funds, escrow has to balance the till basically, and within the, a day or two of your transaction closing, they send out the check. Now, my third reason why you would be getting an escrow refund, this is probably what most of you guys are Googling for, searching YouTube for, trying to figure out about this refund, because this is like a more significant refund. This is money that you've been basically putting into the pot and you want to know, how do I get that money back? And what I am referring to are your escrows or your impounds if you're in California. That's your monthly taxes and insurance that you basically every month when you're making your monthly mortgage payment, you pay 1/12 of taxes, 1/12 of insurance, and that money is getting put into a non-interest bearing trust account basically with the lender. And then when those bills become due throughout the year, they pay it on your behalf, okay? Well, what happens when you refinance, or what happens when you sell that house, or what happens if you just pay the loan off? Well, in that circumstance, what will happen is the lender, they have to reconcile your account and balance it out to zero as well. And part of that process will be issuing you a refund of whatever is in that balance. That's your money. So if you had $5,000 sitting in there because you've been paying your taxes and insurance and you live in California, you're gonna get a check for that $5,000 back. The lender does not get to keep that money, okay? But this is where I think a lot of loan officers, they mess up in their communication because they don't really explain like how long it could potentially take, and they set the expectation that you're gonna get it a lot sooner than you really will be. I would plan on it taking roughly 30 days for you to get your escrow refund back. Maybe you get it back sooner, but most lenders, they don't have a super fast process for this, and they're gonna do it basically within the timeline that's required of them within the law in most cases. So I would expect it to be about 30 days is typically what we see people with their escrow refund checks. And again, in that circumstance, you're gonna get a check in the mail, but not from the escrow officer. In this circumstance, you'll actually get a check from the lender that you've been making that payment to, that was holding that escrow account, whose loan got paid off. All right, so the last circumstance where you will get a escrow refund, and this is probably the most uncommon situation, but it does come up from time to time, is when there was a mistake made. Basically, all these loans, they end up going through audits. I mean, it's crazy like how far out into the future all of a sudden the loan gets audited and you're like, didn't we do that loan 5 years ago or whatever? But when they audit these loans, sometimes they find that something wasn't disclosed right, something was off. And whatever that is, if it was off, usually it's refunded back to the consumer. So let's say like the escrow fee was off by $15 or some stupid thing like that. You're gonna get a refund check from them at some period, but like I said, these things randomly happen, and the mistakes, they don't happen too often. So again, this isn't something that happens all the time, but it comes up. I hope you guys got value out of this video. If you've got questions about escrow refunds or anything else, put them in the comments below. Do me a huge favor, tap that like button. Make sure to give us a subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.